To a bit of local history now, and I thought I'd tell you what was happening in the Mount Barker Courier 100 years ago. So coming up, well, 100 years ago, if you can turn back your times, there was an election that was going to happen in March of 1915 in South Australia, and they had a referendum at the same time to vote on the proposed 6 o'clock closing law. So in the Courier 100 years ago, there were lots of ads and letters to the editor about the 6 o'clock closing issue, and it was considered by a lot of people to be a matter of safety for the soldiers who were heading off to, of course, the First World War. As you know, this year we're having our centenary commemorations for World War I. So one of the ads said that you should vote for hotels and bars to close at 6 o'clock on election day. It's fair all round for the trader and safer for our boys. Lord Kitchener says that anyone offering alcohol to recruits is rendering a service to the enemy. And Lord Kitchener's sister is urging the complete closing of all hotel bars during the war. Vote 6 o'clock. It will mean less debts to businessmen, more money in the savings bank, more cheerful homes. So for the general good of the state, vote 6 o'clock closing for all liquor bars. So how did that vote go? Well, in 1916, the 6 o'clock closing law was passed in South Australia, and pubs in South Australia closed at 6 p.m. right up until 1967. Now, throughout Australia and also New Zealand, there were 6 o'clock closing laws that were brought on around the same time, but South Australia was the first one to start them and by far the last one to get rid of those laws. So if you're in a pub sometime after 6 o'clock, anytime in the next week or so, just remember, if you were back there anytime between 1916 and 1967, you would have been home by then. Travelling on early roads shared with horse and carts could, of course, be an adventure at times too. And here's what happened to one traveller on his way home to Mount Barker after he'd been playing some sport in Menangi. And this story in the Courier from 100 years ago was called A Patch of Sand. So the wind had been frolicsome of late and blown sandy soil out of one of the paddocks near Langhorne's Bridge and deposited it on the roadway to the depth of nearly a foot. Two motorloads of sports on Thursday night, careening gaily along in their return from Menangi to Mount Barker, bumped into the sand patch and incidentally into a cart with two horses, a woman, a boy and one or two residents with a spade. The driver and owner of the first motor car, which was a brand new one, has formed the opinion that his car can do anything but climb a tree, and he whisked off the sealed portion of the roadway and essayed the impossible task of getting ahead of the cart and horses. By speeding up his 35 horsepower engine to its full capacity, he buried the nose of the car in the sand by the side of the cart, so that didn't seem to work very well for him. Then the fun began, for the 10 men and the boy and a woman with a voluble tongue proceeded to give instructions on the removal of the cart and horses from where they were stuck. After half an hour's strenuous work, the horses were practically pushed out of the sand patch and the motor car was lifted back onto the sealed roadway, and the journey to Mount Barker was continued without further mishap. As the motor car never overtook the cart, which only had a 5-minute head start, the owner of the car has been wondering if his speedo has been registering a little bit too much, and perhaps he's actually been travelling at 4 and not 40 miles an hour, as the speedo has proudly but probably incorrectly recorded. So a visit to the city has since been made and no doubt advice sought on this point, and the car and owner brought back to normal. A vow has been registered by the owner of the car that never again will he try to pass a horse and cart, that is, if he has to take the sand and not the sealed road.